Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whenever you are, whatever you are. Welcome to this week's Esoteric Podcast. This week we will be looking at something which I have unfortunately had to suffer myself, which is the subject of dark psychology. This is going to be a big one, so let's just get straight into it. So what is dark psychology? It is at once a simple and complex topic. It encompasses the ways in which one person gets something from another person without them being aware of the tactics or motivation behind those tactics. Many practitioners become quite skilled at hiding ulterior motives. They put on a mask that conveys to people that their feelings or intent are straightforward when in fact they are anything but. This is why the subject is called dark psychology. The victim of dark psychology is most likely in the dark about what is happening to them, and the victim may never find out, or they may only figure things out when it is too late, or the perpetrator has moved on. Now, it is important to note that not all forms of dark psychology are inherently malicious. Dark psychology includes things like sleight of hand in a magic show, which is used to entertain the audience. However, a skilled pickpocket can also use sleight of hand, who roams a crowd in the tourist area, stealing money and other easily accessible items. The key distinction is that the person on whom these practices are being applied does not know that this particular strategy is being used. As viewers, we may know that the magician is simply using a trick to convince us that something has disappeared, but we do not necessarily know the mechanism of that trick, even when we realize that we were fooled. Again, this is a light-hearted and entertaining application of dark psychology, but the kind we'll be discussing here is much darker, more malicious side of the spectrum. Why is it important to learn about dark psychology? People decide to educate themselves on the strategies and tools of dark psychology for different reasons. Some may actually learn a few tricks of the trade in order to get ahead in some aspects of their lives, while others want to learn how to detect predators and steer clear of those who may seek to manipulate them. The only way to constructively discuss the origins of dark psychology is to discuss each topic individually. Because of this, dark psychology covers a vast amount of territory. It is certain that the most elementary and instinctive forms have existed in human society since organized society itself has been in existence. People rose to the top of the food chain and over time developed systems for recognizing the leaders or alphas to whom others would submit. This primitive hierarchy is still followed today in many social circles. For example, a group of high school boys who like to hang out at the mall might have one person in their group who is the most good looking, the most athletic, the most charismatic, and even all three. When the group notices an attractive young girl, there is often an unspoken understanding that the alpha or leader gets first dibs. This is because no one else in the group is willing or capable of fighting the alpha with the intent to take his place. These things work almost without our active consciousness as a natural way to organize and make sense of ourselves as organizations of society. The same kind of thing happens at work, in school, in political office, etc., etc. Dark psychology comes in play in these areas of elementary social hierarchy when individuals use covert or manipulative behaviors in order to establish themselves higher up the hierarchy. They may lie, cheat, or steal in order to establish their dominance and capability. Again, these behaviors are as old as human organized society itself, and their applications and variances are too numerable to count. However, dark psychology has also integrated several different areas of specialization and research which have been established and pursued to understand human behavior, psychology, and finally criminality. We know that human beings do not always interact with each other in a totally benevolent way, and the deviant human beings in society are the ones causing the most harm and damage. Some researchers come to the discipline out of sheer interest and fascination, while other entities like law enforcement are obsessed with figuring out what makes someone like the narcissistic serial killer tick. If they can unlock what's going on in the criminals' minds and understand their tactics, it would give them a leg up on their investigations. The problem is, as the very nature of these tactics is dark, it is very difficult to detect the workings of a criminal narcissist or sociopath until the damage is done and the victims come forward, or in the worst case, bodies are recovered. And dark psychology does not solely exist in the realms of the criminal. Especially in recent years, illegal and coercive interrogation tactics have come to light through major news outlets, documentaries, new evidence, and TV shows, which highlight the reality that sometimes even the good guys will go to desperate measures to get what they want or maintain the reputations of their law enforcement organizations. False confessions leading to years or even life in prison are utilized in court and are sometimes proven false once the real culprits are caught. But sometimes the guilty get away with their crimes when the incorrect person is blamed or convicted. Unfortunately, many of these cases reflect flagrant racism and laziness on the part of a few law enforcement officials. And while there are thousands of skilled, honest officers and investigators working in modern society, extreme cases lead to grossly negative outcomes, which always make the front page. The sensationalism and true crime popularity frenzy are partly to blame for reigniting interest in dark psychology by those who do not work in the realms like law enforcement. Now, it feels increasingly important to be able to defend and rely on yourself in these situations where dark psychology is used maliciously. It can be statistically unlikely that you're going to come face to face with a manipulative serial killer or a sociopath, gaslighting partner, you know who you are. But you certainly would want to have been prepared in case that you hit that narrow likelihood, wouldn't you? This is why I can't say that reporting, social media, a renewed interest in true crime, corruption in law enforcement arena, and dark psychology are altogether unfortunate evolution in the age of personal responsibility. As our cities get bigger and political and social unrest grows intensely, the hunting ground ripe with potential targets becomes larger and closer together. There is no downside to taking it upon yourself to become educated and more aware of the potential threats in modern society. With that said, there is another facet to dark psychology that we will explore that has a lot more to do with active observation and positive psychology, and a lot less to do with serial killers. Neurolinguistic programming and other facets of psychological research focus on reprogramming your brain to perform better or differently as a way to relieve negative disorders that affect people's lives, such as depression and anxiety. NLP in particular is used in many situations by people who seek to teach their brains to reinterpret those triggers which have always prompted negative feelings. These harmful mental experiences can often lead to lifelong struggles of becoming productive and fulfilled. And this may lead to isolation, loneliness, perceived failures, and often a deepening of those underlying mood disorders. NLP is one way to help a person retrain their brain in the moments where it really counts. This strategy, developed in the 70s, utilizes the brain's relationship to language and how it interprets language and information in everyday life. It teaches the brain through repetition and consistent application to replace those feelings of anxiety, fear, self-doubt, etc. with more positive and constructive emotional and behavioral reactions. The research and application of NLP have improved many people's lives. In particular, it has been very useful in treating those mental states which arise from particular trauma or past experience with an emotional manipulator. The Dark Triad personalities date back much further and encompass the realm of the narcissistic, the sociopath, and the Machiavellian types. While these personalities themselves have existed in human beings for probably as long as we've been organized as societies, the actual focus on research and understanding them in terms of psychology is much more recent. It was recognized that it is not just important to be able to identify these individuals in society. We also need some basis of understanding in order to combat and prevent the potential harm inflicted on these people's targets. While many forms of dark psychology can be used on an organizational level, such as illegal interrogation tactics and organized crime, the tactics utilized on a personal, often one-to-one level, are some of the most interesting and malicious examples of dark psychology in practice today. The reason the Dark Triad is so closely associated with dark psychology is that these strategies are often integrated and applied in their lives, almost like a natural talent. Their skills arise out of a necessity and drive to acquire what they want from other people, but they have to devise manipulative tactics because they do not have the capability or willingness to acquire them in acceptable ways. While the different personalities differ in key ways, one commonality is that they are willing to hurt other people in order to get what they want with little or no empathy involved. Because of the very nature of their willingness and coldness when it comes to the other people, dark psychology tactics are natural progression, as they often teach themselves as they identify their proclivities and natural talents. Now that we've discussed a bit about the different types of dark psychology which exist in society, we will now demonstrate how prevalent those practices really are in modern day society. Because our idea of the dark psychology practitioner cannot be limited to obviously deviant or those with a clear criminal intent, the array of environments in which potential victims live out their day-to-day lives expands to include even those locations which may not be first considered. We can imagine the dark alleyway or even a crowded bar as a great hunting ground for a predator employing dark psychology tactics, but often our first encounters with dark psychology occur a little closer to home, inside the home to be exact. What we experience in our childhood has a profound effect on how we turn out as human beings, what our values and morals are, how that reflects whatever religious or spiritual practices we are brought up around, how we treat and respect others, and whether or not we are taught to be afraid of or dislike those who are different from us. The list goes on and on. Though we don't always turn out exactly as our parents intended, sometimes this is a disappointment, other times people break out of the antiquated immoral practices or ways of thinking of their parents to become better, more informed people. These experiences can be rather benign and might include things like you realizing as a teenager that you do not share the religious values your parents have taught you or your political views. Perhaps your parents wanted you to go to school and follow in their footsteps in terms of a career, but you soon discover you didn't enjoy their occupation. Sometimes, however, people experience hurtful behavior, verbal abuse, or both, which over time distorts their perception of how people should interact with one another. If, for example, a young boy was taught throughout his childhood that respect should be earned and trust shouldn't be given just to anyone, he may grow up being very difficult to befriend and may have trouble trusting even those he cares about and has positive experiences with. Though it is not always the case, often, in unfortunate circumstances, young minds pick up on poor role model behavior, which may follow them around for the rest of their lives or until somebody points it out and teaches them to behave differently at least. People may either be receptive to this reteaching or they may dismiss it out of hand. This is a character trait that might be attributed to equal parts genetics and upbringing. Let's look at a few examples. If you enjoy documentaries or true crime, you've probably come across an interview or two where a professional who studies criminal behavior talks about things that happen in our childhood that affect how we turn out as an adult. Childhood trauma, such as physical or sexual abuse, parents experiencing a messy divorce or fighting in front of the kids, alcohol or other substance abuse in the home, and many other examples can lead a child to emulate such behavior without a demonstration of others' opinion. If there is nothing done about the influence of these poor role models in the home while the child is growing up, it can be very easy for the child to fall into the same behavior, especially since such experiences are often accompanied by the development of chronic mood disorders like depression, anxiety, difficulty dealing with anger, and personality disorders such as sociopathic and narcissistic tendencies. While the development of a personality that favors dark psychology is often cultivated in childhood, this is not always the case. Sometimes it is learned later in life when an individual feels he has exhausted all other means. Those dark psychology tactics are the only way to achieve a goal. This goal might be money, power, control, fame, esteem, etc. We all tend to have a desire along these lines, but most of us develop a corresponding framework of morality and values which would stop us, for example, from setting rumors all about the workplace in an effort to demean another coworker with whom we are in direct competition for a promotion, which brings me to the next area of society where dark psychology often runs rampant: the workplace. Workplace politics are familiar to a lot of us through sitcoms, movies, social media, and of course real life. Most of us chuckle in commiseration when a friend tells us about a coworker who is annoying and quirky, who gets on her nerves, etc. We understand that it is very unlikely that we will go through our whole lives without ever having to deal with a difficult coworker or boss. But we make decisions and prioritize the things we care about in order to get past those things or people who are not so enjoyable to be around. And if a situation at work is just too much to handle, we often make the decision to report behaviors to a boss or to simply find a new job out of necessity. These actions take place following overt behavior which is harmful to the company or other co-workers. But how about those things which we don't readily recognize are happening? This is where the clever practitioner of dark psychology tactics takes center stage. While many strategies utilize the manipulation of people's negative emotions, such as fear and anxiety, sometimes the strategies alternately manipulate people's positive emotions in order to build up the practitioner on false pretenses. Skills such as charisma and public speaking often go hand in hand with these topics because it herds people together in ways to make it easier to make the desired impression upon multiple people at once. A prime example is in a meeting at work or perhaps in a boardroom where people might be more inclined to follow the outspoken charismatic participant. These tactics might be used by a member of the team trying to take control, or by the leader of the group, say CAO, in a meeting with his underlings. The goal is to win the favor and trust and respect of those who will prop him up where he wants to be. He can do this through a clever combination of flattery, peer pressure, personality mirroring, and many other strategies which, if done well, will not even be detectable by the people being affected. These strategies involve paying close attention to the target or targets and basically telling them what they want to hear. It's basic yet complex, especially when dealing with multiple people and multiple personalities. It becomes important to make each individual feel both unique and important, but also to make them feel the pressure to adhere to the group, the rest of which is also in the process of being won over. People don't like to stick out or be different in general, especially in the work environment where often success and prominence depend on things like popularity and how well the person is getting along with the co-workers and higher-ups. As we've discussed, sometimes dark psychology tactics arise out of necessity when an individual has a goal in conjunction with a very limited or low personal standard regarding ethics, principles, morality, etc. When something you want is more important than how you treat others, dark psychology can be the most effective and efficient way to get things done and achieve personal goals. Let's move into the bigger arena of politics to take a look at how this might and does manifest. Anyone in the business will tell you the world of politics can be one of the most aggressive, two-faced and personally challenging working environments on the planet. This is because not every politician has only the good of his people in mind as his goal. We know through research and social experimentation that power and wealth have a strong correlation with corruption. No shit, Sherlock. I know. Having these things play with our psychology in a way that reinforces the idea that power and money and fame mean you are just better than everyone else, more capable, more intelligent, etc. This means that what you want and how you want to get there supersede all other considerations because you believe you know best. Of course, I'm not saying every politician out there is crooked, but politics is definitely a rich ground for pulling out and examining dark psychology tactics in action. Take the speech, for example. We talked about individuals in the boardroom who may consciously or unconsciously be able to control others' thoughts and opinions through charisma, public speaking, and tactics related to flattery and winning over those for personal gain. In political speech, this can happen on a massive scale. As a politician speaks to hundreds, thousands, or tens of thousands of people at once, how does he accomplish what he wants to accomplish on this scale? Obviously, it would be quite challenging to be able to speak a single speech and convince every single listener of the truth and validity of everything you've said, but he can be quite effective if he utilizes some key strategies. One strategy is a careful framing of information that paints your political agenda as much more correct, intelligent, and ethical than that of your opponents. In this strategy of persuasion, the speaker is appealing to the audience's sense of logic and reason. A statement is made, it sounds smart, it follows logically. Therefore, the people in the audience begin nodding their heads in agreement. This must be done carefully and cannot be a bald-faced lie that everyone in the audience knows is untrue. But there is an artful finesse to picking and choosing details involving the facts and events to frame the event how you want it, how it will put you in a place that has an advantage over your opponent. The audience's emotions aren't really invoked in this strategy, but those who are looking for a candidate for whom they feel is smart and capable may be affected greatly by this tactic. But the politician rarely utilizes one strategy alone in this context. After all, he is trying to reach and persuade as many people as possible within his allotted 60 or 90-minute time slot. And one of the quickest paths to persuading a complete stranger is through their emotions. How many times have we seen a speaker open up his speech by telling a story about how he was brought up and how this motivated him to take action and improve the world in a specific way because of his childhood or adolescent experiences? This is a tactic that utilizes the audience's emotions and sensibilities in order to gain their attention and sympathy. The audience is placed in that situation through a brief storytelling episode, then brought emotionally to the conclusion that this individual is an honest man of integrity who is trying to correct something that is wrong in the world with which he has a direct experience. If this story is told in a moving and authentic way, this tactic is one of the quickest ways to potential voters' hearts. Our next arena, which we will get into much more detail later on, is the arena of dating and seduction. Dark psychology strategies run rampant in this area of human society and to a wide array of varying degrees, some of which are quite innocent, others can be deadly. Let us set the scene. A young woman sitting at a bar alone didn't intend to be alone, but her friend is late getting out of work, and she said she would wait for her if she wanted to. That was 15 minutes ago. She's drinking by herself and absently staring at the TV set above the bar when a man approaches her and asks if he can sit down. He's smiling, well-dressed, and doesn't sound pushy, so she says okay. Her conversation is very casual and friendly. He isn't staring creepily at her and isn't using any cheesy pickup lines. She decides he's nothing to worry about and enjoys the conversation with him. She starts to volunteer details that he didn't ask for, but she feels comfortable enough to let him know why that she's here and that she's waiting for a friend. He starts to share details about his life. She's under the impression that he is willing to show a little vulnerability as he describes how he's had a hard day at work and is considering leaving his job for something better. He's a pretty snappy dresser, so he can't be hurting too bad financially. He compliments her on her looks and tells her that she seems pretty smart and enjoys the conversation. At this point, she starts to notice the beginnings of an attraction, and she decides it can't hurt to see where it might go. Her conversation turns a bit flirtatious, and she's had another drink at this time, and she's feeling more and more loose and comfortable with the man. She's given him details about her life, but he's also given details about his, so she doesn't feel like she's being taken advantage of in any way. The thought crosses her mind that she might actually rather spend some more time with this guy than hang out with her friend, and she asks if he wants to go somewhere quiet to talk. One thing leads to another from there. So what are the nuances to what just happened with this interaction that led to a fun night together with an attractive stranger? There might have been a lot more going on that meets the eye. Granted, there are certainly men out there who are naturally gifted in conversation with women, but a lot of men need to coordinate and plan carefully in order to get where they want to be, especially if they aren't the most attractive man in the room. Luckily for them, women can often be won over with personality and charm rather than looks, as they aren't so superficially inclined as so many men are. This is where the dark psychology strategies come in. This man approached the woman in a casual, non-threatening way. What she didn't realize is that this man has spent a good time just watching her. He did this before approaching her to make educated guesses as to how she was feeling, what her personality might be as she engaged with other people and the bartender, and whether or not she looked open to engaging in a conversation with a man. He decided she looked slightly uncomfortable by herself and guessed that she was probably waiting for someone who was running late to meet her, and that she probably wasn't there specifically to find a date. By approaching casually at an angle instead of straight towards her, he sent a message that he was just looking for conversation to pass the time without any kind of agenda. He smiles and gestures in a friendly manner, releasing personal information, made her feel comfortable with letting her guard down a little as he wasn't really coming on to her. As the conversation progressed, he was careful to share details about his life, but also listen to everything that she had to say and engage with her to make her feel important and worth listening to. He listened and remained engaged, sending the message that he was really interested in everything she was talking about. By the end of the night, she decided that she was in control of the situation and made the first move, which is exactly as he intended in the first place. These examples we've discussed are just a few of the major areas where dark psychology is always at play in the modern world. Dating and seduction techniques extend to online platforms, as the use of social media makes it possible to groom from a distance and deceive a whole new level. Young adults and teenagers are especially at risk from this type of predator because their relative naive natures and willingness to share information without detecting that someone might be trying to manipulate them. As we move along, we'll encounter more specific situations to put dark psychology into context as it appears all around us in our daily lives. Learning to recognize when strategies of dark psychology are at work can be a life-saving skill. Often the situation is not so dire, but decades of research into dark psychology tactics and deviant personality types tells us that many of the most sinister criminals in history have fallen under the umbrella categorization of types that utilize dark psychology in order to lure victims to their fates. For example, serial killers are often cited as some of the most clever users of dark psychology tactics for the simple reason that over time they develop these skills for the sole purpose of scratching that itch they have to kill or abuse victims. Ted Bundy, perhaps one of the most well-known serial killers of all time, got very creative when it came to luring his victims, and a lot of his strategy relied on the prep work that took place even before he spoke to the victim. The first stage of an intelligent practitioner's strategy for using dark psychology is one that remains invisible to the victims, or anyone else for that matter. This is the observation stage. This is the time when the practitioner sets aside to pay very close attention to potential victims in the area, whether he's already chosen his target or is watching one he wants to zero in on. The target is observed, and the practitioner downloads everything he possibly can about the individual, her movements, the way she speaks to others, her apparent personality type, who she speaks to on a regular basis, where she works, her routines, and other things. All of this information is useful to the practitioner trying to discover the most effective way to approach and put into practice whatever strategy he needs to get what he wants. The motivations for using dark psychology on other people are varied and different for each individual who decide to study another human being. This is part of what makes this reality so potentially dangerous. When you don't know the motivations, it is hard to predict behavior. However, there are several things you can do to better prepare yourself for a dark psychology encounter, and you're already well on your way to fulfilling one requirement, which is educating yourself high. Dark psychology in large part depends on the victims not knowing what's going on, hence dark psychology, as we explained earlier. People's personalities and vulnerabilities vary from person to person, but at the same time there are certain universalities in terms of human behavior that the intelligent dark psychology practitioner exploits to the best of his ability. The whole process is a game, and if you remain one step ahead of your potential adversary, then you can avoid harm and deceit that will follow the initial approach. Educating yourself and remaining skeptical of strangers, especially if you get a bad feeling about a person approaching you. The next basic practice, next to educating yourself on the basic strategies of dark psychology, is simply to be aware that not everyone is who they present themselves to be. It is unfortunate that in this modern reality we cannot really afford to just trust our fellow men and women, but there are many people out there just looking and waiting for an opportunity to strike at an unsuspecting victim. This is not to say that you should never develop new relationships and trust new people, but you should keep your guard up until you've received enough experience and evidence to make you feel comfortable and confident about offering another person your trust. It is not like untrustworthy people have never existed in the past. They have, of course, but the landscape of tools at the dark practitioner's disposal has expanded on a massive scale compared to just a few decades ago, where there was no Facebook or social media to get an advantage on a target without anyone knowing. Social media, as has been revealed in recent years, can be used as a benevolent social connectivity tool, but also for darker intentions that utilize false news stories and emotional manipulation. The 2016 US elections is a perfect example of what has recently been brought to light as this kind of dark manipulative technique in practice. Being aware and vigilant when it comes to allowing strangers to win over your trust and friendship is no different in the digital realm. If anything, you should be even more careful with people online than those you meet in the street of a busy city. The internet has provided a means for people all over the world to associate with one another in thousands of different contexts. People use the internet for work, social planning, meeting strangers with similar interests, and dating and meeting potential life partners. All of these require to some degree that you relinquish personal information, whether it is a simple email contact or someone who wants to meet you for the first time and find a nearby meeting place that is convenient for both of you. Those super popular personality quizzes all over social media provide a huge amount of data information on people who will willingly give this information out. This data does not just disappear once you're done with the quiz or whatever form you're filling out. Data is the most lucrative business and commodity in the world by a whole bunch. And most people are completely unaware of what's going on when they log into their email accounts or go shopping online after clicking an ad on Facebook. Some people simply don't care. They enjoy the fact that they can be catered to and inundated with ads that are targeted to their specific interests. The fact is, there are incredibly detailed profiles of every single human being who is active online, and this information and data are bought and sold over all of these platforms in order to learn how people tick and then exploit it. There is a balance between being able to protect yourself and being open to helping others and forming relationships that develop quickly. While you want to remain aware of all the possibilities in public situations and when interacting with people you don't know, you also don't want to cultivate a lifestyle where you are living in fear and seem completely unable to trust other people outside of your current circle of friends and family. We as human beings are social creatures. We thrive on developing relationships and being able to relate our experiences to those other people in conversations or other scenarios. Don't be afraid to engage in conversation with that intriguing man at the bar during a party, but simply be careful about the information you are freely giving out. The group of people actively wanting for an opportunity to manipulate others is much smaller than the group of people who are simply looking to make connections and relate to someone. Don't shut everyone out who crosses your path if you feel like you might be interested in getting to know someone. So far I've used a lot of male pronouns when talking about dark psychology, but women are just as capable and ruthless when it comes to utilizing dark psychology from personal gain. I know this from personal experience. Statistically, there are many more males in the population of violent criminals who fall into the category of narcissistic or sociopath, but it is not unheard of for a female to be the aggressor of an insidious dark psychology situation, perhaps with a significant other or family member. The fact that we hear more about male perpetrators and manipulators than women does not mean these females do not exist in the population. There is simply a different set of tools at the woman's disposal, and they are used a little bit differently, but believe me, they are there, and they are insidious. Now that you're familiar with more general terms of the subject, let's get into some nitty-gritty by looking at one of the key factors, manipulation techniques. Manipulation itself comes in many forms, along with varying intentions and motivations. Some of them are used with malicious intent, while other people simply use the principles of persuasion in order to make a sale or convince someone of their point of view. Dark psychology is often brought into discussion when we are talking about the absolute worst examples of manipulation tactics, although technically magicians using sleight of hand to impress a group of children is dark psychology. This point has to be stressed as we move on to discuss specific techniques so that you have a broader idea of what we are discussing when I say dark psychology and manipulation. It is likely you clicked on this video not because you were here to learn about magician's techniques, so you will notice that most of the dark psychology techniques discussed are used for a decidedly malicious or selfish reason on the part of the practitioner. So let's begin with the subject of persuasion. Aristotle outlined 3 modes of persuasion under the terms logos, pathos, and ethos. Each of these persuasion modes is a good illustration of the different ways people try to get in with other people with the specific intention of getting them to believe the same way that you do about a certain belief system, or to get something from them willingly that they had not been inclined to give before the conversation began. As we discussed earlier, there are many different paths available to take in order to fulfill this goal. You can appeal to a person's sense of logic, you can appeal strictly to their emotions, or you can appeal to others by giving the impression that you are someone others should follow based on things like strong character, charisma, morals, ethics, etc. Logos in the term related to appealing to logic. Ethos is related to the appeal to the emotions. And pathos is the strategy of presenting yourself as a strong and worthy leader for others to follow. Each of these is effective in different ways, and oftentimes they are used in conjunction in order to reach lots of different people and personalities at the same time. We can see all of these strategies in actions by looking at the example of a political speech as we did earlier. Pathos, logos, and ethos can also work on smaller scales in one-to-one situations. The salesman who has a couple of minutes of interaction on the sales floor with a potential customer will employ tactics that engage the person's emotions through need. He will often pitch the customer in a form of a well-reasoned argument for why the product will bring some benefit to the customer's life, and he will also portray himself as someone who the customer can trust and respect based on a professional, congenial, and friendly demeanor and mannerism. Another common tactic is the taking over a room, becoming the alpha. This area of manipulation happens on a group scale that is not necessarily as large as political speech. When we are talking about the alpha of a group, we're talking about this unspoken or spoken dominant individual in a group, usually a male, who is the leader, most popular, etc. The term is used to describe a person with many dominant personality traits. Here we will talk about the process of winning over a group of people who have been strangers and are now aware of an interest in this individual. These tactics are often used in a situation where a practitioner wants to gain the attention of someone in the room. Perhaps there is someone important present who could help the individual move forward at work or in some other endeavor. Or perhaps there is a woman he wants to get the attention of, but she is surrounded by people and tends to favor the popular, powerful type. As human beings, we are very social animals, and we take a lot of cues about how to feel about other people by the way that others react and interact with that individual. How often have you been in the middle of a crowd where one person starts talking loudly about someone nearby who smells bad or is dressed weird, and people all around within earshot start looking around and automatically making grimacing facial expressions as if they are the ones who have directly interacted with this weird, smelly individual? We are all more susceptible to social influence than a lot of us like to think, and this overconfidence is something that the practitioner will be taking advantage of over time. In this, there is a tactic called mirroring. Mirroring is about assimilating subtle mannerisms, behavior patterns, and aspects of someone's personality into your own behavior and speech patterns as you are speaking with the target. The reason this works to help you integrate yourself quickly to a target is that human beings on a fundamental evolutionary level respond more positively to things and people that appear familiar. It is a signal of safety and of like-mindedness that will bypass any negative impressions, assuming it is done in a way that does not look mocking. This would be a disaster, as no one likes to be mocked, and it would be a major insult. There are many other possibilities for dark psychology tactics that may have been presented in any given event. On a conversational level, there are less covert but no less effective tactics that people practice on a daily basis, even if they aren't overtly trying to win somebody over for the specific goal that they are aware of. Flattery is one of the most common things people use to get on people's good side, whether they are trying to pick up a date or form a new friendship and alliance. People enjoy flattery when it doesn't feel like the person is trying too hard and being insincere. Think of a time when you were in line at a store or other public place and a complete stranger takes the time to stop and compliment you on something. Maybe you look nice in your outfit, they like your hairstyle, etc. This feels good because someone has gone out of their way to address a stranger when there really wasn't anything to gain from the measure. It can turn your whole day around when someone compliments you like this. This just feels as good as receiving compliments at work from co-workers or when you're out with friends. When it is done right, flattery can instantly ingratiate someone who had simply been a complete stranger before and move them quickly into the realm of acquaintance. However, flattery can go sideways when a target picks up on the fact that you are only flattering them as a precursor to asking for something. We see this played out in sitcoms all the time, where a character approaches the boss and offers a silly compliment before asking for something that he's pretty sure the boss will say no to. If he can butter him up first, he knows that there is a slight possibility that he will improve his chances of getting what he wants. This can really put a person off if the tactic is revealed and the behavior is too obvious, and he may be completely shut down in the conversation as he realizes he's being duped. Tactics we have discussed so far are all very subtle forms of what is essentially mind control. When most people hear the phrase mind control, they associate things they might have heard in movies or on TV shows. It sounds like a science fiction concept, and there are plenty of people who do not believe it is possible to control another person's mind, and to some degree they are correct. But the term mind control does not mean the same thing to everyone. When psychologists use the term, they are not talking about turning another person into a robot for personal use. The arts surrounding mind control are much more subtle and more powerful than most people are familiar with, unless you know anything about MKUltra. Mind control reached public consciousness through the media, through the likes of science fiction movies, but there are practices which can have a direct influence on a subject's psychological state. Even the manipulation techniques through social media ads is a form of mind control in which there is a subtle influence going on that the target is completely unaware of. The idea of mind control practices is not to turn a human being into an automaton, but to influence decision making on a level where the individual believes they are making their own decision or reacting under their own volition. Let's take a look at a few examples of overt mind control. Hypnosis is another term that comes with a lot of connotations straight from science fiction movies. When people are hypnotized in TVs and movies, they are often completely catatonic or under complete control of the hypnotist. This is certainly untrue, but there is a great misunderstanding in the culture about the nature and intentions of hypnosis. Hypnosis is often used in the context of treatment for people who are suffering from memory impairment as a symptom of a bigger problem. It can also be used as a form of therapy in order to work through traumatic experiences and encourage the moment of emotional processing, like grief. The hypnotherapist is not someone with special powers over people's brains. Their practice rather stems from full engagement and openness to empathy directed towards a patient for different means. The essential ingredient to a successful hypnotherapist is an established trust and respect between the therapist and the patient. The patient goes into the process with an understanding that her part in the process is not just to sit back and let things happen. The patient has a responsibility to open up to the process and allow themselves to become vulnerable and impressionable. They go willingly and follow the therapist where they lead. So in this way, there is a partnership going on within the process instead of this popular notion that the therapist can simply put people under a spell. In fact, there are plenty of people who are simply less impressionable and open to the process of hypnosis. Therefore, they would see no benefit from any attempt. In a hypnotic session, which aims to reach back and pull memories from a patient's mind, which has put up a barrier of protection from painful experiences, the hypnotic therapist gently guides the patient over time close to the origin of those memories that they are trying to retrieve. The patient must let go and be willing to follow the instructions and suggestions, almost like someone leading them by the hand as they walk through memory lane. In this way, the patient may be able to stumble upon memories of repressed experiences that are working to hold them back or hurt them emotionally without seemingly controlling them. Once these repressed memories can be addressed, the patient can work past the pain through therapy and refresh their minds to come to a place where they're able to fully function and able to process and develop new memories and emotions. Hypnosis is also used to treat patients who suffer from PTSD through engaging with and working through repressed experiences or experiences which haunt the patient day and night. Each process is different, and as well as individual outcomes. Hypnosis has become stigmatized, and many people look at the process with skeptical views. But there are many others who praise the process of hypnosis, claiming the process is responsible for great recoveries through consistent practice. Next, let's take a look at a much more insidious form of mind control, that of gaslighting. If you've never heard the term gaslighting, then count yourself fortunate for having never had to experience it, or perhaps you just didn't recognize or know that there was a term for this particular manipulative technique. Gaslighting refers to a process where the abuser convinces the victim over time that what he or she believed is real is questionable. Often this happens through a long series of denials in which the victim tries to get an abuser to acknowledge their wrongdoing while the abuser consistently denies that any abuse is going on. At first, the victim may be enraged or become insistent, throwing the clear evidence of the facts she knows to be true in the abuser's face, but the abuser will remain steadfast in their denials. Over time, this confrontational attitude deteriorates and the victim is broken down. After a while, once confident and confrontational victims start to succumb to doubts and confusions as to what they are actually experiencing. The effects of this kind of abuse are long-lasting and often intense, especially if the abuse is happening during childhood or adolescent years. When a parent or guardian engages in gaslighting, the child becomes incredibly confused and ashamed that he or she cannot grasp what's going on. This damage can extend to the child's personality as well as his or her emotional intelligence and development. This kind of abuse is not something that a person gets over quickly with a few sessions of therapy. It is also one of the most dangerous forms of long-term manipulation because the mental damage that it can inflict. Gaslighting can also be just one ingredient in a potent cocktail of manipulation techniques which work together in other tactics in order to enforce control and manipulation of a partner in a romantic relationship. Once a bond of love and trust is formed, partners who suddenly switch gears and become abusive can be incredibly hurtful and will power to inflict a large amount of pain and suffering on the partner or those who love the abuser. We sometimes hear in the news about a domestic situation where the victim in the partnership simply refuses to let go or get out of the situation. Sometimes we may be tempted to judge these individuals as to say, why don't they just leave? The truth is, there is a whole lot more going on than meets the eye. If the situation were simple, then perhaps we can imagine an abuser coming straight out one day out of the blue and beginning to abuse their partner. The partner sees the behavior, knows that they're in danger, and they leave immediately to stay with a friend or a family member. But domestic abuse situations are rarely so simple. There are mind games that are likely to be played on the part of the abuser, and these games can work their way deep into a victim's mind so that the victim may believe preposterous things about the situation or remain in complete denial that there is anything serious happening. And before I start having any more flashbacks, let's move on to our final method of mind control, that of the cult. The cult is an interesting topic because there are often lots of different manipulative and dark psychology techniques going on at the same time. Once a person has been hooked through some kind of promise of emotional or spiritual fulfillment, the human mind often works against itself when the object of desire is something we want so badly that we ignore red flags going up in our minds about the situation we've gotten ourselves into. When we are desperate to believe in something or someone, there are no limits to how deep we can bury our heads in the sand in order to give ourselves the illusion that we are living the way that we want and getting what we want out of this lifestyle. This has been the case for many people who have come forward years after being suckered in by a cult that they found to be practicing very unsavory things behind the curtains, including child abuse or other forms of sexual abuse, verbal abuse, torture, etc. Even those who may have seen these behaviors going on were sometimes too buried in the mire of the cult's belief and under so much influence that they were able to turn a blind eye and convince themselves that there was nothing really immoral going on. This will of course ring bells with certain psychological experiments for anyone who has any knowledge of the subject. The Milgram experiment illuminated this aspect of human psychology quite clearly in a fascinating way. It often held up a light to understand a little bit better how a malicious movement like the fascistic party could have given rise to power under such seemingly immoral conditions and motivations. The human mind is a powerful and complex mechanism, and the power of social influence should never be underestimated. Dark psychology in the realm of seduction is the one which has caused the largest amount of heartbreak, trauma and tragedy for countless men and women. But the application of dark psychology when it comes to seduction and the romantic world is again part of a spectrum of tactics, not all of which are overtly malicious. Someone who enters the dating world and presents themselves only with their best side is practicing a form of dark psychology, in that they are presenting a sort of white lie as they hide the things about themselves that they think others may not like, or may prompt negative judgments about them without first getting to know them. We are all guilty of making false negative assumptions about people sometimes before we even talk to them, so a degree of this is totally understandable. But where the lie persists, and there is never a fully open two-way exchange of trust and respect, there is fertile ground for turmoil and even abuse. One of the most dangerous things about the practice of dark psychology in romantic relationships is that not only can the effects be devastating and have long-lasting effects, but the perpetrator also often carries out these insidious strategies over a long time while distorting and playing with the target's emotions. When a person has successfully gained the trust of another individual, that person becomes very vulnerable in the realms of emotions, because trusting someone means believing in positive motivations and good decision making, even when you don't have all the facts or do not have a front row seat to what's going on. To avoid repetition with a later part of this discussion, we will focus on the seduction that takes place at the very beginning of a relationship. As mentioned previously, the use of dark psychology may not be a focused, conscious effort, but simply some advice a person got from a friend or something he read on a dating forum. For whatever reason, the dark psychology practitioner in this scenario will begin with some careful observation and information gathered before making his first move. Just as the prior example of an individual trying to take over a room and become an alpha-like presence in the room, someone with a singular target whom he wishes to win over with as little as a few minutes, will begin by making sure he's chosen the best target for his intentions. It's not enough to just pick out someone that he finds attractive. He must also look out for additional signs that this individual is going to be open to an approach at all, let alone a friendly conversation. The setting itself could just be about anywhere that it would be appropriate to approach someone you don't know and introduce yourself. The environment may be a place like a party or a bar or some other public place where people hang out regularly, but we could just as well be talking about a quiet coffee shop, a park, or outside a bus stop. People meet acquaintances of all kinds in all different places, and once the target is chosen, the place where the practitioner will want to make his first move must be a place where it is going to be comfortable and convenient to carry out a conversation. For example, he wouldn't want to meet his target while she's busy on her way to work or obviously trying to accomplish a task that demands her full attention. Rather, he wants to catch her somewhere where she is relaxed and just enjoying something without a lot of stress involved. People in this environment and state of mind will be more open to unplanned meetings and events, and he will want his target to be as comfortable and open as possible. One of the most important decisions that the practitioner will make when using dark psychology and seduction is choosing a target. We often watch programs or news reports of someone being abducted or fooled into doing something a person didn't want to do, and you might think, well, I would never do that. Well, the truth is, most of us can be overconfident when it comes to making judgments and reading another person's character. Sometimes we are correct, other times there is a very clever clever, dark psychology user behind the scenes who only presents what he wants us to believe on the outside. The target will often be young and exude personality traits that are consistent with someone who is open and friendly and likely to engage with a stranger. In this example, we are looking at the dark psychology user who is planning to approach a complete stranger in a public place in the hopes that he can develop some kind of connection that will open the door to more interactions. You might think that one of the key ingredients to a plan like this is that the practitioner has to be really attractive, but the truth is that men can impress and charm other people without necessarily being the most attractive person in the room. If he's got the right preparations and knowledge in place, an individual can be very charming without being devastatingly good looking, although this factor would certainly not hurt. Different women are attracted to different personality types, and the practitioner who is aiming to charm a woman must pick up on these desired traits rather quickly and add them into the interaction or personify them based on the information he has gathered about her in the past and what type of men she likes. Keep in mind that the tables can easily be turned here, where we are talking about a woman who is using dark psychology to seduce a man, though the tactics there will work in a woman's favor, as the guide to most men's immediate attraction is purely physical. A man looking to seduce a woman can be a little trickier, so this is why we are looking at it from this angle. First impressions involve what most people view as superficial aspects of a person. When the man approaches his target, he will be dressed in a way that conveys to the target that he's what she wants to see. Is he a busy professional who has stopped in his tracks and just had to say hello? If so, he might be wearing a business casual ensemble with some pricey looking accessories. Perhaps he is a sporty type and is wearing something casual but made to move in. This could be the route he would take if he wanted to catch while she was out for a job or for a long time walk or something like that. Perhaps he wants to look younger and adopt a more gently tousled boho kind of style to mirror the target style, etc. His appearance will play into the first encounter and the impression he makes on his target, but then he has to open his mouth. His approach is careful to be non-threatening and casual. He doesn't want to scare her away by approaching her with an obvious objective, say, of spouting off a pickup line and then asking for a phone number. The best approach will happen if it appears the man has just happened to be in the same place at the same time and is intrigued by the appearance of this attractive woman. He doesn't want to assume to steal away her time if she is not amenable to giving it away, and the approach itself might have to wait until a better time if he does not get a positive response right away. If it appears he is bothering her anyway, he will probably need to take a step back and try again another time, or else move on to a different target. But if he is successful and approaches in the right way that doesn't alarm the target, she will send him a positive signal, such as a smile or a greeting. The progression to seduction will depend a lot on how well the dark psychology practitioner reads the target and how well he responds in a way that is effective and positively reinforcing his selected persona. Those who are skilled in this area will be able to charm the woman rather quickly. He knows that women like to be listened to and to feel like the person cares about what she is saying. To play into this, the practitioner may throw all kinds of wonderful compliments and questions and interest at her in order to convey that he is not only listening but very interested in everything she has to say. This will create a sense of camaraderie, and the longer this can be maintained, the more the target will feel comfortable talking, and eventually she may even release details about her life that will further work towards the practitioner's goals. What the user will look for in this situation are the subtle little cues that the target is interested in. Often, we as human beings give signals subconsciously without our immediate awareness, and we all have certain reactions that go off automatically when we are entertained or interested in a conversation. The most positive signals the target gives off, the more are taken by the dark psychology practitioner as a go-ahead to move forward with the interaction and to turn on the charm as much as possible. The goal of this first interaction is to secure the intentions of a second interaction. This could be explicit with an outright invitation to hang out again in the future or for a date, or it could be another coincidental meeting in which both the individuals run into each other, perhaps during a similar activity or set of circumstances as this first interaction. Each time the practitioner interacts with his target, the goal will be to increase the attraction that may have started when the two of them first met. The progression will look a lot like a dating situation, but the dark psychology user is using tactics that are covering up the truth of the motivations and goals underneath. In another scenario, the practitioner may have the goal of getting a girl to come with him the same night. One of the commonly used tools in this scenario is alcohol, with the intention of getting the girl drunk enough that she begins to make poor decisions and become overly trusting of a complete stranger. When this situation is created, the dark psychology practitioner can simply make a few suggestions and the woman may be convinced that she is in safe hands and can trust the man for a fun night without any commitments afterwards. Women can protect themselves from predatory behavior by being aware of the common tactics and warning signs when engaging with strangers. Some of the advice you've heard for years seems trite and obvious until a woman finds herself in a situation where her senses and thinking are clouded or distracted. It is also important to be on guard and aware of situations that may arise with close friends or family. Friends who attend a big party or go to a bar together should never abandon the group in favor of spending time with a man whom she has just met that night, especially if she's drinking. Her friends should not allow this to happen, even if she insists, as the man in question seems unbelievably charming. The old saying of things that seem too good to be true usually are is told over and over again for this very good reason. If you suspect that someone you care about is under the influence of a master manipulator, it is important to talk to them about the possibility that they are being lied to as a means of getting something in return for not being straightforward. Don't be afraid to start that conversation if you believe there is a possibility that someone you care about is in danger. A lot of people may find the idea intimidating, or they hesitate because the friend might think they are overbearing or overstepped their bounds. It is always better to find yourself in disagreement with a friend than to find out that he or she has been abused or mistreated by someone that they had thought they could trust or developed feelings for. The truth is, when a practitioner of dark psychology is able to get past the seduction phase successfully, they will often continue the ruse because they enjoy playing with the control and trust they've won and enjoy basking in their prize. They may be using the individual as a way to make themselves look good, like a trophy, or they may be using this person as a means to some other end. The motivation behind such manipulation and abuse can vary widely, and the damage that can be done in the end should never be underestimated. One of the easiest ways to categorize the dark psychology user is to discuss the Dark Triad. The Dark Triad involves a set of deviant personalities which are known very commonly to employ the tactics of dark psychology as a regular routine practice in their interactions with people. This is because what we consider normal interactive abilities and social skills are different in some way in regard to these three personality types, if they are there at all. The social skill set often developed by these personality types center around manipulation and the pretense of being normal and conveying normal human emotions. They find out very soon that this is absolutely necessary because they do not have the capability for these particular feelings towards others. We often cite people in these three categories as being without feeling or without empathy for others. This means they do not feel bad about hurting others or their pain when they are sad. They do not even feel empathy towards another person's feelings of anger and frustration. The members of this circle remain enigmas in a lot of respects, mostly because it is difficult for someone who is not a part of this circle to understand how someone could possibly function in a way that is devoid of human empathy and caring or true honest love. These three personalities of the Dark Triad include the Sociopath, the Narcissist, and the Machiavellian Personality type, each of which we will now take a closer look at. The Sociopath is often confused with another category of deviant personalities, the Psychopath. However, there are a key series of differences. The most commonly recognized difference between a sociopath and a psychopath is that the sociopath's personality is developed after birth, while the psychopath is born with this particular deformity. Sociopaths enjoy experiences such as childhood trauma or abuse, or perhaps they learn non-empathy from role models or the people with whom they are brought up around. Whatever the examples, this behavior pattern and mindset are developed or learned through a process of living and experiencing that involves triggers and formulations of the deviant personality type, while the psychopath is innate in the affected person at birth, including all that this personality involves. The sociopath and the psychopath can be very similar in nearly every other way that people are commonly familiar with, but the fact that the sociopathic personality is formed as a result of living and learned through experience means there is a lot of room for subtle changes and emotional nuance. The sociopath is not immune to feelings of empathy and guilt, though the threshold is quite high and these feelings may be ignored in favor of continuing the hurtful behavior simply because the sociopath still places himself in high importance above other people. The psychopath, on the other hand, did not develop feelings of empathy or pick up on subtle changes in emotions through experience and learned behavior. They are simply not wired with the capability to feel for others. Sociopaths often develop skills related to dark psychology strategy out of the necessity to convince other people around them that they are normal in the sense of human compassion, empathy, romantic love, and etc. To do this, they figure out what makes people tick and how to fool them. This develops in many different ways. Perhaps they had an adult figure at a young age who taught them, through example, how to lie and cheat and manipulate to get what they want. Perhaps they started trying things on a trial and error basis to figure out what works and what doesn't work with different sorts of people. Or perhaps they grabbed a few books and did some practical studying to understand the human brain and the psychology of emotions. However, they eventually get to a place where they have mastered some dark psychology skills, and they usually end up using people on a regular basis in their adult lives simply out of habit and necessity to continue living for the benefit of themselves. The term narcissist is probably thrown around even more than sociopath and psychopath and comes with its own set of connotations. The narcissist is often depicted as the well-dressed man with a deceptive smile and affect who goes around fooling people into doing things for him or giving him things under false pretenses. These gifts can be anything from money to donations of sex, power, influence, and admiration. The narcissist has an addiction to satisfying himself and his own needs and desires. He pursues fame and appreciation and praise and will do whatever is necessary to place himself above everyone else and then to gloat about it. The narcissist is also devoid of human emotions where it concerns other people. He does not love in a conventional way. He simply pretends to love for the sake of being loved in return. It is all about him. Narcissists develop as a response to life experience, how he is raised, how he is treated by others. The narcissist is not born a narcissist in the same way a psychopath is born a psychopath. However, while the sociopath may be able to recover some capacity for empathy, guilt, and compassion, it is rarely seen that a narcissist makes any degree of the same recovery. In other words, once a narcissist, always a narcissist. Now, the narcissist may be very clever in that he can convince persons of interest that he has changed or seen the light or come to Jesus in this respect. But it is, most often, a complete lie in order to get some sort of attention or praise. Again, manipulation and dark psychology are the narcissist's bread and butter, and where those skills start to develop and the individual sees the fruits of his labors is only given to the narcissist more fuel and motivation to continue and get better at those skills. They will use the skills on anybody and often target those who are emotionally vulnerable and naive. With these types of dark psychology practitioners, we are talking about the long game in which the practitioner invests months, years, and even decades into manipulating and controlling a single individual. This is most associated with a spouse, partner, or business colleague. The possibilities here are countless in terms of what exactly the narcissist is aiming for, but we can be assured that it is something about personal gain in some form. The tragedy among those who are fooled into believing a narcissist is someone he isn't is that the target who has fallen in love often falls into the trap of believing they can somehow change the narcissist through enough love and dedication. This is especially sad because it feeds perfectly into the narcissist trap, who only desires to keep the claws of attachment deeply ingrained in his target so that he can continue to siphon love, support and affirmation for as long as he wants. The narcissist gets a lot of excitement and satisfaction from challenging himself and finding himself successful in manipulating those hard-to-get types. It is just another source for him to glean self-praise and admiration. He will also move against anyone in his purview who tries to usurp what he has gained or expose him to other people. He will also use any measure necessary to accomplish the removal of these obstacles. A great majority of serial killers fall under the category of the narcissist, amongst others, as they are obviously willing to do whatever needs to be done in order to satisfy their own desire. They do not need to feel guilt or shame in the same way that neurotypical human beings do, or else this sensation would override their desires, though they often insist, once caught, that they had felt remorse after the killing. The Machiavellian component of the Dark Triad personality is named after the author of a work known as The Prince that states that the necessity for proper and effective leadership is absolute in the sense that essentially the ends justify the means. The leader must do what is necessary in order to enforce rules and maintain power. Nothing is off the table when it comes to making sure these needs are met and to eradicate any threat to a seat of power. His writings support the use of force, fear, and harsh punishments as a means of making sure the populace remains under control and were discouraged from going against the leader's wishes and orders. The Machiavellian personality is most closely associated with the personal accumulation of wealth. He is the miser sitting atop his mountain of gold whilst looking around at everyone else who lives their lives without sufficient means even to live. He is also without much capacity to feel for other human beings. He does not look at the less fortunate and feel compelled to give some of his wealth. He is more likely to look at the penny or two in their position and try to take them for himself. The three components of the Dark Triad are centers for demonstrating the necessity to manipulate and use dark psychology tactics as a way to function in a world full of people who are different from you in few very important ways. The lack of that, which makes us feel like we can connect and use other people as a support mechanism for getting through life, necessitates that those needs are fulfilled elsewhere. What exactly is it that the narcissist lives for, if not to connect with others or have a family to nurture and protect? The answer for all three of these personality types is that the self becomes a god at an early age, and everything the individual does thereafter is in fact an act of worship to that god. To illustrate, think of a devoutly religious follower who devotes a good amount of time to the study and worship of God. Everything this believer does is pursued through the lens of doing what his God wants, and he follows the rules and regulations set before him in ancient religious texts as a sort of guide for how to live his or her life. If he feels called to go to a foreign country as part of a missionary trip, he will then do what he can to raise money to support himself. While he is away, he takes every opportunity to do what is needed there in the name of his God. The personality of the Dark Triad functions in a similar way, only in that they themselves are the God who they follow and worship. When a god calls for sacrifice, even the sacrifice is another human being. History has shown that human beings are willing to offer this blood for the sake of satiating the desires of their gods. The narcissist too will sacrifice other people in the name of what is more important, and the person in his life who is most deserving above all others is himself. The same line of thinking follows for the other components of the Dark Triad, each centering on his own specific obsessions and pursuits. None of them are altruistic in nature, but completely self-serving. The problem for them is that they get what they want, they often need to go through other people. And this is where the necessity for dark psychology comes in. Not only will they often have a natural affinity for the skill, but they will find it fun to mess with people. They feel affirmed to look as if they have made fools of others, which props themselves up as the smarter, superior being. They themselves would never consider that they could be susceptible to such manipulation, and they are often immune to such strategies for the simple fact that they don't have those pesky emotional vulnerabilities that most other people share. They do not trust others, but instead seek to get other people to trust them, love them, and admire them. The easiest way to fool others in this regard is to closely observe and then emulate human behaviors that will make them appear as if they feel just as other people feel. They can make people fall in love with them, or they might exploit another's pity through deception in order to get a handout or some other type of free influence. Whatever needs to be done. One of the most fascinating and insidious characteristics of members of the Dark Triad personality group is their capacity for denial when it comes to being challenged directly when they are caught in their schemes. In terms of gaslighting practices, when they are given clear evidence of their behavior and are asked to acknowledge their actions, they will simply disregard and deny without budging an inch. This is infinitely frustrating for the victims or the individual trying to make sense of the Dark Triad's motivations and foundations for behavior. All we do is stare at them in awe of how they can so readily disregard any and all attention to others and their concerns simply because they don't care. Perhaps they are even bored. The most painful experience in relation to dealing with individuals of the Dark Triad personality type is when that realization comes through and you are unable to completely get rid of the feelings you've developed for this mask that has been hiding an insidious person. When the realization hits the victim, it is like having that person with whom they've been in a relationship suddenly disappear. It can feel as if the love of one's life has died and there is just this demon in his or her place. If the target cannot come to terms with this realization and this mask of truth, then she may try for years and years to get back that illusion of the relationship, even going so far as to live in denial herself. This is one of the most truly tragic results that can occur in the situation involving Dark Triad personality types and dark psychology. But there are even more horrible ends to a situation in which a Dark Triad personality pursues a desire and stops at nothing to get it. Murder, abuse, and inconceivably horrible actions have been utilized in order to satisfy the simple, basic urges within them. That part of most of us which stops us from doing such things for the sake of selfish pursuits is completely absent in these individuals, and their most basic urges and selfish desires have often free reign and influence over their behavior. It is a terrifyingly fascinating structure within these individuals that they can at once be harboring such animalistic and selfish natures whilst being perceived by others as a person of high moral standing and poise. These traits make those on the spectrum of the dark personality triad personalities something of the most dangerous people on the planet. Now that you have a much clearer idea of the different types and practices of dark psychology practitioners, we'd like to provide you with a brief list of tips for you to incorporate into your arsenal. This would allow you to be always on guard should a situation arise in which you may encounter a dark psychology in your own life. Spread these tips around to the people who are close to you so that you will not only help defend yourself, but you will also protect those you care about and love. Erring on the side of caution is always preferable when finding yourself in a dangerous and confusing situation in which dark psychology is used. Number 1. Trust is a commodity to be earned and not given freely. Dark psychology users often use the manipulation of emotions to bypass the guards we usually have up to help us discern between someone we can trust and someone we have no reason to trust yet. Yes, when someone who we don't know asks for help, it is often kind and generous to offer a helping hand, even if you don't know the person well. But there are certain situations where this behavior is inadvisable simply because of the possibility that the person asking for help does not have good intentions. One factor to pay attention attention to is the time of day or night when somebody approaches you for help and whether or not the area is lit in a public area. If you are out at night and there's not a lot of people around, then someone coming up to you and trying to get you to follow them somewhere, it should be a huge red flag. This person may be sincere, but he may not be a good person. It would be preferable for you to feel safe and protect yourself by potentially leaving the person to deal with a flat tire on their own. Number 2, don't drink alone. We're talking about being out at a party or a bar as opposed to a nice glass of wine whilst you binge on Netflix at home. Never go into a public setting alone where it would be easy for someone with bad intentions to take notice that you are alone and drinking. If you are somewhere waiting for company, be wary of anyone who would try to approach you and convince you to go somewhere whilst you are by yourself enjoying a drink. Number 3. Don't be afraid to disengage. Most of us recognize that disengaging from interaction in the middle of a conversation is probably going to come off as pretty rude, but you should never discount a bad feeling about a situation just because you are afraid of being rude or impolite. Explain that you don't feel right about the interaction, or if you feel the need to, make up an excuse to get out of a situation quickly and leave. Call someone right away if you feel the need for backup or an escort home. If you are somewhere without a lot of people around, move towards a public area where there will be other people to ask for support if the need is felt. Number 4. Have a panic button. There's lots of gadgets and apps out there which offer discreet means of communicating with someone of your choosing should you find yourself in a situation you can't easily get out of with some help. If you are out and about by yourself for a walk or a jog or in a public place but are approached by someone who is a little aggressive in his tactics, you can simply press a button or open an app without the person noticing to let someone you know and trust know that you would like some help to get out of your situation. In today's modern society, it is highly advisable that you do your best not to be out and about without a way of communicating with people you trust in case anything unexpected comes up. Number 5. Call them out. This defense may not be the most preferable for certain personalities, but for those of you who have no trouble speaking your mind and letting someone know when they are wasting their time, don't be afraid to call out a person who is trying to manipulate you and let them know that you are onto them. If the setting is public, go ahead and raise your voice a bit so the others can hear you. It may just serve as a warning to other potential targets in the area, and the practitioner will likely feel embarrassed or feel the need to flee the scene as his perfect cover has now been blown. Number 6. Continue your study and research dark psychology tactics. One of the best actions you can take to guard yourself against future dark psychology tactics is to continue to educate yourself on the myriad of ways that dark psychology can manifest in day-to-day interactions and settings. These users are always trying to be creative, coming up with new and more insidious ways to get under people's skin for their own benefit and exploitation. The more familiar you are with the possibilities, the better prepared you will be when a situation comes up. Finally, number 7, spread the word. The knowledge and understanding you've gained from this is something that could very well save you from a devastating situation in the future, which you would never see coming until it is too late. Letting others know what you have learned, sharing skills and tools, will serve to benefit others in the same way. If you know someone who has been the victim of dark psychology in some way, you know that this can have a devastating effect that often lasts for the rest of the victim's life. Emotional trauma and manipulation can be some of the most painful and insidious tactics a practitioner of dark psychology can use on another human being. So spending some time not only educating yourself but also to educate others can be really important to help save a person from potential harm. Don't be afraid to talk to someone candidly if you feel there is someone in their life that is harming them in some of these ways. The human mind can often deceive itself through denial, and sometimes it takes input from another rational mind to bring these individuals out of this dark place. It's worth the risk of being called nosy when you are legitimately afraid for another person's safety, especially if that person is someone who is special to you, like a close friend, partner, or family member. On the same token, it is important to remember that you have placed your trust in these people for a good reason, and that you may not have all the facts on which to base your assumption. Calling people out as practitioners of dark psychology can be a serious accusation and should not be taken lightly. Have a serious and heartfelt discussion with those you trust in order to understand the situation more fully and make rational decisions about what you should and should not do to help out those you care about. In some situations, the scenario may involve someone you don't know. There are avenues through which you can report suspicious behavior anonymously should you suspect that someone nearby may be manipulating or exploiting someone in some way. Again, if you got alarms going off in your brain about a potential predator, try to get past those feelings of anxiety in order to step in and check on the person whom you are worried about. You might just be the catalyst for saving someone from a lot of heartache and pain, and you may even be responsible for saving someone's life. These outcomes should be at the forefront of your mind in a situation where you feel uncomfortable. Coming off as rude or impolite is a very low price to pay compared to shrugging off those feelings and letting an innocent person walk into a potentially dangerous situation. And in a couple of points on this, I'd like to wrap up in this conclusion. People are not always what they appear to be, and it is important that this message is ingrained into the minds of people of all walks and lifestyles. No one is off limits when it comes to dark psychology, and now that you are familiar with the idea that dark psychology is being used every day and on a wide scale by people who do not necessarily have bad intentions and who are not actively trying to deceive, sometimes emotional reactions and demeanors can influence our behaviors in ways we do not understand unless we've done the research and practiced awareness of ourselves and our own actions on a daily basis. Do a favor for those you love and trust by reaching out and sharing this knowledge. Thank you. And on that note, we will end today's episode. I hope you enjoyed this, found it instructive and interesting. And if you did, please leave a comment. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, the like button, get that notification so you don't miss another episode. And join us over on Patreon, where we have early access and other goodies available for the different tiers. And on that note, I will say thank you for listening and wish you, whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever you are, a very good rest of your day. Thank you for listening, and goodbye until next time.